Hi everybody, Adam here. So today I wanted to log on as the calf muscle defender, and I want to explain exactly why it is that your calves are not just a vanity muscle, they are not just a muscle group that bodybuilders train because they think that it will make them look good. They actually serve a lot of important vital purposes, and as a result, I think that a lot of people should be training them regardless of what their goals are. And, even if they're not necessarily training specifically for aesthetics. We get this concept of vanity muscles, which are basically muscles that don't have a ton of purpose. They don't necessarily relate too strongly to strength, and they are mostly just muscle groups that we train because they make us look good. Those are the vanity muscles. I would absolutely say that your arms are typically a vanity muscle group. Most people really don't need to be doing arm focused training for most purposes because they will get plenty of arm training just doing major compound movements, bench press, rows, overhead press, and so on. Again, however, I do not feel that calf muscles fall into the same category, and I am going to make the defense of calf muscles today. With that said, I wanted to take some time to remind you to smash that like button. Smashing the like button helps grow the channel, and it also prevents you from being cursed with 10,000 years of tiny calves. As always, I am also generally accepting online fitness coaching clients, so if you are interested, do not hesitate to reach out via the link below, and I will be back in touch with you. So why are the calves so often put down? So an important thing to understand is that the calves are a relatively small muscle group, much like your biceps, much like your triceps, much like your deltoids. They're a muscle group that is smaller. And because they are a smaller muscle group, that means also that they tend to start off weaker, they tend to develop slower, and they tend to, basically require a bit more endurance-focused training, because if you add too much weight too quickly, then you're basically going to very quickly get to a point where your form is crap and you're basically doing super short range of motion, and you are not getting a very effective workout in for those muscle groups. Training for the calves can also be difficult to get right because calf raises are a relatively short range of motion exercise. And again, that means that it is very easy to just add a ton of weight, get that range of motion even shorter, and as a result, turn it into a situation where you're just doing a ton of cheating, you're doing a ton of momentum, you're not actually building a lot of muscle mass, you're just doing a lot of bouncing, which that'll probably build a bit of strength, that will probably build, your tendons up a bit, but it's not actually going to train your muscles in a good way. It's also something that doesn't directly contribute to any of the major lifts. Obviously, at the end of the day, your triceps will contribute pretty strongly to a bench press, for example, but your calves are not necessarily going to contribute to any major lift. And so because it tends to share these qualities with other vanity muscle groups, and because, again, it does not have any direct impact on any of the major lifts in terms of building strength, we tend to associate it with those vanity muscles. However, today I wanted to dig in a lot more of the practical purposes of the calves and why they can be useful for a lot of non-bodybuilders. So the thing to understand about your calves is that they do serve one incredibly important function. So your calves essentially anchor to the back of your knee and to the back of your ankle, and that means that it runs between the two, and it plays a really, really important role in keeping those joints stable. So it goes a long way towards protecting your knees and protecting your ankles. Anytime we need to stabilize those joints, the calves are acting to do so. And in that sense, they also act kind of like a shock absorber, much like you would see on a bicycle or a car or something like that. So anytime you're doing running, anytime you're doing jumping, you are basically slamming your entire body weight onto the ground every time you strike the ground. And because it's not just your body weight that's involved in the process, it is also the force of gravity. That means that the impact forces generated by you landing, especially on a very hard surface like pavement, can get to be really, really high, like incredibly high, especially if you're doing something like depth jumps where you're jumping off of a high box and you're landing very solidly on the ground. That's going to generate a ton of impact, and that essentially sends a shock wave up your body, which then needs to be absorbed. And your calves are the first line of defense against that. Your calves are like that shock absorber that is there to absorb that force as much as possible. If your calves are not up to the task, if they're not tensing to stabilize, then what can happen is that can then travel upwards it can impact your ankles, it can impact your knees, and so on. So the calves play a really important role in terms of protecting you against those impact forces, which are pretty common. At the end of the day, yes, most of us are not running around, but there are plenty of ways in which, for example, just walking, going up and down stairs and so on, where your calves are very active to protect your ankles, to protect your knees, and so on. So what are the practical applications of training your calves? Well, the first one is for runners. Again, like I said, any kind of impact is going to cause a lot of those impact forces to travel up your body. And so a very common thing that I've experienced myself, that I've seen a lot of my clients experience as well, is that you try and start running or getting into cardio for the first time, and you very quickly hurt yourself. You hurt your foot, you hurt your knee, and so on. And training the calves goes a long way towards preventing that. It goes a long way towards protecting you against injury, and of course, just preparing you for success in the long run, keeping you injury-free over a long period of time. So training the calves becomes especially important when you're talking about runners, when you're talking about jumpers, when you're talking about anybody who has a lot of impact forces involved in their training on the lower body, simply because, again, the calves are there to absorb that force. The next one is squat depth. So a lot of people don't realize this, but your calves actually have a huge impact on your squat depth. This is the whole reason why you may know that basically when you elevate your heels off the ground, whether by putting your heels on a block or a plate, or by wearing special weightlifting shoes that have an elevated heel relative to the toes, this just means that you're starting out with your ankle a little bit more extended by default, and therefore it doesn't have to flex as much in order to get fully all the way down into a deep squat. So very often the thing that can limit your squat depth is not actually your hamstrings or your glutes or whatever the case is, like most people tend to think it is. It's actually your calf muscle flexibility that goes a long way, because if your calves are not flexible enough, that's going to stop your knee from continuing to travel forward in a squat, and then that's going to limit how much you can do with your hips as well, simply because they work together. Like, that's just how it is. It's a chain. So while elevating your heels can go a long way towards making you better capable of getting into a deep squat, and that may be enough for some people, it's also important to actually just train the calves. Training the calves, especially if you are very careful about doing pauses at the bottom of your reps, will go a long way towards increasing your flexibility as well. And that, of course, is then going to increase your range of motion on your squat, which enables you to get deeper into a squat, which, especially if you're a bodybuilder, just means that you'll be able to build more muscle mass in the process. And then, of course, there's just the standard recovery from injury. I've worked with a lot of what I would call general population clients, average, ordinary folks, who have a history of ankle injury. Maybe they've rolled their ankle a bunch, maybe they have injuries from falling over. Whatever the case is, it's a pretty common kind of injury. And it's something that is very treatable, so long as, of course, you are actually training your calf muscles and you are actually helping, again, rebuild that stability in that joint. Much like training for runners above, working your calves just goes a long way towards rebuilding that strength, stability, and function that you need to have healthy, injury-free knees and ankles over a long period of time. So that said, what is the right way to train calves? So I've seen calves get trained wrong a lot. Again, kind of the most common way to do that, as I mentioned above, is that basically you are going too fast, you're adding too much weight, you're just bouncing the reps. It's all cheat, it's all cheat reps. There's no actual, control. You're not actually building stability or flexibility in the process. So what you want to do instead is the opposite of that. You want to do slow, controlled reps. You want to do a slight pause at the bottom of the range of motion to make sure you're feeling the stretch. Obviously, doing your calf raises off of a slight step or other way of elevating the toes so that you can increase your range of motion a bit. And if you do this right, then you're basically going to build stability, flexibility, and strength all at the same time, because you're getting that stretch at the same time that you are also working out the muscle. And of course, so long as you are taking it slowly, then you are going to be building the muscle more so than just using a lot of momentum. You'll typically need to work in a higher rep range, you'll typically need to use a lower weight, and you will typically need to add weight more slowly. You don't want to add weight if you find that it becomes then difficult to get the same range of motion, because that's just shooting yourself in the foot. A good range of motion is kind of a prerequisite for being able to build a lot of muscle, and the shorter your range of motion is going to be limited, the less you're going to be able to build. So you want to keep that long range of motion, only add weight if you can tolerate it, and it is not going to cause you to just cut your range of motion down to nothing. You want to focus on individual reps. You don't want to rush it. You want to take things slowly, mindfully, and focus on really feeling that pump in the muscle group. You want to really feel that burn before you stop. Another crucial factor is to do a mix of what are called straight leg calf raises and bent leg calf raises. So a straight leg calf raise would be something like standing calf raises on a step, doing calf raises on a Smith machine, doing calf raises on a leg press, etc. While a bent leg calf raise would be something like a seated calf raise machine, where the weight is then being put on your knees as opposed to on your shoulders. This just gives you a little bit more variety in terms of the stimulus, enables you to target all of the muscle groups of the calves effectively, and just get slightly better results overall. It's not the worst thing in the world if you're only able to do straight leg calf raises, but if possible, it's awesome to add in bent leg calf raises as well, because you're going to get more bang for your buck out of it. So that is it for this week's video. As always, if you like the video, don't hesitate to comment, subscribe, tell me what you want to see in future videos. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Reach out below if you are interested in coaching. As always, I will see you all next week. Have a good one.